Morning.
Good morning, or good. I guess it's good morning for you. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Good morning. Afternoon, I should say. Yeah.
I'm trying to. Is that a good angle? Maybe I don't know.
You're very North American in your jean jacket.
Yes. Yeah. I bought this in California, and it was cool enough to wear it today. So.
Oh, when you were there? When you were there recently, you bought it? Or?
Yeah. I did some shopping for clothes that it's kind of hard to find clothes that like are just my size in Japan. Everything's a little on the small side here.
It's very similar. So, like, I'm almost going to say it's the exact same thing about the UK.
Oh, really?
Size. Every size here is a size smaller than what it like.
Yeah.
Like, so extra large is actually large.
Really? Okay. Same thing then.
Completely, but somewhat. 1 second. I just realized I need to close the southern door here.
Go ahead.
I'm in the I'm in the main room. We call it the main room. It's kind of kitchen / dining room, but it's a giant. It's the biggest room in the house. So we call it the main room, and because we spend a lot. And there's the entrance to our deck and the garden and everything out there. But that's
nice.
The main room. But
it looks like it's a sunny day over there.
It is very sunny day. Yeah, very, very sunny day. Very lovely. It was yesterday as well. Very nice. So I was speaking of cultural things. I wanted to ask you how.
Yeah.
Just a personal question. How similar are you to sort of Japanese ways, Japanese thinking? Like you've been living there a long time, it sounds like. Have you kind of have you noticed, have you taken on sort of cultural sort of thinking and ways of, you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, yeah.
For instance, I had to ask myself when you said, well, as it happens, I can move this today. And I said to myself, that sounds like a very Japanese way of saying, is he actually saying, yeah, it's fine? Or is it actually a problem? But I'll do it anyway.
Okay. Sorry.
Do you know what I'm saying? Japanese code for, oh, yes, that's good, but it's not really good. You know what I mean? Do you know?
Yeah, it wasn't that. It's actually perfectly fine. What happened was, normally at this time of day on Sundays, I'm either out somewhere or I'm doing my kobudo practice, martial arts. And so typically it would be difficult to Zoom early like this. But today it just so happens, hence the use of that phrase, it just so happens that today it's perfect. I'm perfectly okay with
it. Just was like, it was one of those things where I wondered whether, like that's what a Japanese person would say. Even like it's actually completely inconvenient and they have to rearrange, like it's completely a disaster to rearrange their whole day. But that's fine. As and I just
right now
half jokingly wondering whether that was one of those and I just a serious question, how much have you kind of
well,
I
answer your question,
lots of British things, like I sort of say Canadian now. From after living in the UK for 20 years.
It does rub off on you. I have been culturally acclimated to Japan pretty considerably. Well, one thing is some people like say that I am like, I seem very Japanese, like in my manners and so on. So maybe that's why it was so easy for me to fit, to become accustomed to Japan. And then it also, sort of rubs off on you. So, I mean, I do have things where I get sort of a a reverse culture shock almost when I go back to the US, and some things are very different from how they are in Japan, so that has occurred to me. But yeah, I mean, in terms of how it affects me personally, I would say that there certainly is an effect, like, bowing a lot to people and that sort of thing, sort of expressing, like, I think you picked up on that, expressing things sort of indirectly and not being like blunt like an American would, like an American would be more like, sure, let's meet at 4, or no, I can't do that, very like straightforward, whereas my reply was probably a bit more nuanced.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, part of my personality.
Actually, the British culture is very, you don't just come out and, say the
Right.
correct thing. You kind of, or you always put it in a nice way, even though it's rubbish, or unless it calls for actually being, unless the situation calls for, calling something rubbish if it's rubbish, But, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's similar to Japan. Japanese are very polite, but with that also comes, there's a certain element of people don't always tell you straightforwardly what they really think. So there is a certain aspect of the American bluntness can be a bit refreshing in some circumstances. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a cultural difference, right?
Again, very similar here. You don't get the full direct thing, and sometimes you have to interpret what they're saying, and saying like, oh, it's sometimes I just wish, can you just be a little bit more, let us rub off. That's, even though I don't want it to change, but yeah. I wish, sometimes I wish it could just say it. Anyway, yeah, that's quite funny that there are those similarities of what you're saying, but way it's very different because you can pick up on things from Brits, I think, much easier than you could some Japanese. Japanese that you can pick up on the
the nuances can be hard to grasp. I have a lot of friends and acquaintances in Japan, obviously, through my connections with Jodo Shinshu. And like anywhere, I mean, there's also personality and background. People, have very different personalities. And I've been in situations where I was like the first foreigner that someone had met in their life. And so that's an interesting experience, like you're basically representing. I mean, I've been in some really interesting, but I mean, Japanese people are very friendly. Sometimes people are surprised, like I can sit for a while in seiza, which is sitting on your legs, not what we call like not lotus style like I'm doing now, or Indian style we sometimes call it in the US, but where you're sitting on, you've probably seen it, like Japanese people sitting for tea ceremony and so on. That's called seiza. And I can do that for a while. And people are always like, wow, you can sit in seiza, that's amazing. They're so surprised. And cool. It's been mentioned that, maybe in a past life I was Japanese at some point. that idea has been, I sometimes wonder that myself, to be honest. I think I mentioned it before, like no one in my family has any real connection or interest in anything to do with Japan. And I'm like this outlier, and I have this strong love of Japan and, on all this. And I do wonder, like, it might have something to do with, a past life or...
Yeah, no, I'm very similar. I was, I wonder that about myself. East Asian cultures in general, not just Japanese cultures, but I've been drawn ever since I was a kid to East Asian culture, all, descriptions really, probably mostly China and Japan, but then again, that's where most of any other East Asian culture kind of stems from in a sense. But a lot of that. But anyway, but just and I've often wondered the same thing, that,
Yeah.
just things about my personality or things that I'm drawn to about that, or why I enjoy the music, or, it's not just Buddhism, it's
Right.
a whole sort of range of cultural things that attracts me, art, all that. Anyway, and I wonder the same thing, is if it was, past lifetimes. And I would think, well, it would have to be, it would, so I think to myself, because of the rareness of human birth. So if you think of the type of cultural things that I'm drawn to, it would have to be, it probably wasn't as a human that I was there. I probably was a dog, or more repeatedly an animal in these cultures, or a insect, or ghost even, in the, that was around these cultures that picked that's the only thing I can think of, that if it was a human, maybe if I've been, it would have been in other universes, or other, past universes that don't exist anymore, or some, that had similar cultures, or anyway.
Well, the scriptures, in some point, I can't remember call to mind the exact quote, but it does say, someone who encounters this teaching has undoubtedly met, Buddhas in the past, or has practiced, Nimbutsu in the past. So, there is that aspect of, potentially in our past existence, we may have had some kind of encounter with Buddhism in some way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So it is
you mean to come to Buddhism in general, or to come to the Amitabha teachings, to come to the is that
specifically, it's talking about the Nimbutsu teaching, or Pure Land teaching. So I think, but I mean, I think it probably applies to other forms of Buddhism, schools of Buddhism as well. But
this, and it's, while we're on that subject, this is something I wondered: the good causes from the past. So
we've talked about that quite a bit, I think.
Part of that is just that you encountered Buddhism in some way, or a Buddha in a Nirmanakaya form at some point, or is that's part of it? Is it also, because I mentioned once where I've heard that if you've done devotional practices to Buddhas, that's part of the good causes from the past. And but you've also indicated, we didn't talk about it at the time, but you've also indicated it's not, again, it comes back to it not being about us creating the good causes, that it's Amida. Right. In each of those instances where we did encounter, it was Amida that drew us.
Yeah,
that's
an important. That's an important thing to note in our tradition, is that this shukuzin, or this past causes, stored good, it's sometimes translated, is not our good that we create, that we stacked up through our own efforts, and then we had this amazing experience of other power. No, it's Amida's working, guiding us to the vow. So whenever you read the phrase stored good, or hear this phrase stored good, past causes and conditions, these are not things we create. It's actually the working of Amida's vow power, which is fulfilled. The scripture says that the power of the vow and the vows working are, the power fulfills the vow, and the vow gives rise to the working. So it's a ongoing, this power that is working to bring us to the truth in light. Some people say salvation, but some people have a problem with that word because it has strong Christian connotations. But liberation, freedom, uh, in Mahayana, we say that the state of nirvana is bliss, self, purity, and it's eternal, right?
Yeah.
And some people wonder, well, if Buddhism is a teaching of non-self, then why is self in there? And the reason is self. Yeah. The meaning of self here actually has a sense of the true of freedom, unimpeded, unhindered action, the ability to actually work, be free of the concept, the limited concept of self and so on. So back to the working, it's important to realize that for us as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, that it isn't our stacking up, accumulating merit and good, although on a provisional level, of course, devotion to Buddhas, prayer, even meditation, all of these things, Shinran, Shonin, and the sutras are clear, are provisional means that lead us, lead us in the right path. But ultimately, it's Amida's, the working of his vow through these things that is, it's not our efforts that we're putting in. And one, I think I've brought up this verse before, but there's a verse in I think it's the Pratyutpana Sutra, so one of the earliest texts that actually earliest Mahayana text that starts to have elements of Pure Land thought. In other words, this is like one of the oldest Pure Land texts that actually mentions Amida. And in this, I believe it's that sutra. If I'm wrong, then that would be unfortunate. But it is one of these sutras where the Bodhisattvas say to Shakyamuni, we practiced the Bodhisattva path through countless lifetimes, but we were never able to escape the cycle of samsara through that practice. And now through the Nimbutsu, it was only through the Nimbutsu that we were able to realize enlightenment and become Buddha. So now, of course, the meaning of Nimbutsu here doesn't necessarily mean, the vocalized Nimbutsu. Nimbutsu in this context may be referring to sort of the older concept of thinking on the Buddha, right? But it's the same tradition. It's the same, it wasn't until Zendo Daishi Shantao in China that the emphasis on the saying, the name, just simply saying the name was made clear. Up until that point, there was the Nimbutsu Samadhi, and other practices that involved, visualization, meditation, right?
Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So in that passage too, we have bodhisattvas, advanced, practitioners of Buddhism, saying, we couldn't do it. We tried and tried and we failed every time until we encountered the Nimbutsu. And it was only through the Nimbutsu. So the Nimbutsu is the working of the vow, right, of Amida's power. And so that was the only way we could part from birth and death. So again, the Shukuzin, the stored good, the past conditions, it's all Amida's working. And we don't really have to worry about and think like, have I stored up enough good? If you are hearing this teaching and you're encountering this teaching, then you've already been led to that point, right? Yeah. Now, attaining real and true Shinjin is a whole nother thing that is very, it's a process that is ongoing. But one thing we want to be careful. There is a sect or a group that it's kind of there's sort of cultish group in Japan called Shinrankai, and they do teach that. Yeah, they do teach this idea that we need to, that if we do devotion and we do good things, then that becomes a thing that can lead us to Shinjin and so on.
It helps Amida along. It helps.
yeah. You're helping the ocean make waves, and no, that's not the way it works. It's like, that's a good analogy. If you're at the beach and you're, splashing the water,
crashing in, and you're going,
I'll help this wave,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Your ass when you just stand there, and you're like, I'll help this along. Yes, let me help this wave.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so this is why Jodo Shinshu, the teaching of Shinran Shonin, is called Zettai Tariki, which in Japanese means absolute, unconditioned other power. It's not. There's no mixture. It's not 99% Amida's working and I'm doing my 1%, to seal the deal. No, it's 100% Amida's working.
Yeah, 17 Val, not 1920.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a very important question, and I think this is something that a lot of these issues are, the Jodo Shinshu perspective is different from, other Pure Land perspectives and schools. And they'll tell you that, you need to meditate, you need to pray, you need to be devoted to Amida constantly, and then that, deepens your faith, and then
It's faith, but you make sure you do 10,000 a day. 10,000,
right?
Or
or say the Nimbutsu so many times a day.
Counting, and the kind of state of mind to a degree that you should be in while you're doing that counting. But it's faith. I still say it is faith, but it's Anyway,
right? Yeah. Well, it's faith. They would say it's
like that was an earlier kind of one of the earlier schools of one of the earlier masters, right? Could that have been kind of that sort of thing, like?
Yeah, there's a literal reading, I think, of Zindo, of Shantao's, some of his works. There's still an element of kind of suggesting that we have to sort of step up to the plate and put in some effort. There's still sort of an element of that. But
That's exactly
Shonin, go ahead.
That's exactly what I was thinking with Shantao in that sense, that maybe some, because there are sects now based on strictly Shantao teaching,
right.
And that's part of what they do is they emphasize faith, but yet there's still this element of, well, you do need to do this and practice this, but it's still faith, so anyway.
Yeah, I think too, what I learned at Chuo Bukkyo Gakuin was that I remember an instructor who said that, the true full other power Nimbutsu teaching was really started with Honan Shonin. And up until Honan, it's not that it wasn't the true, Jodo Shinshu teaching, but it's that there was, up until Honan, still some interpretations, some words, some phrases, some, teaching that was kind of a little bit, there was some, I don't want to say self-power, but, there was still some of that kind of interpretation or thought in there. Like if you read Genshin, very famous, he wrote the Ojo Yoshu, that has, very famous in Japanese culture depictions of all these hells and all this stuff. It's like a divine comedy of Buddhism, kind of.
I never realized that it was in his his writings. I've read about a lot about all the realms. I'm so into Buddhist cosmology, and I've read. I've only a couple of times actually did a thorough listening and reading about the hells, because some of it's very disturbing. It's actually, very, very disturbing. It's hard to have any kind of detachment. Like, yeah, I could end up there. I'm, it's not like it's like, oh, this interesting thing about, but when I look at Buddhist cosmology, it's not like, oh, just this fascinating, cool thing. It's, well, these are realms I've been in and could end up in, and you know what I mean? It's very personal so when I've read about the, like, oh, like it's very some of them. It's very, anyway, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't know that bringing it back to Genshin.
Yeah, Genshin Kasho, his title is. He is, pretty big, famous in Japanese culture for these. And there was the Hell Scrolls that were made, a pictorial version of the Ojo Yoshu, the description in Ojo Yoshu. And I've seen them. They're, if you go to the National Museum in Kyoto, or I think maybe they're at Tokyo too, but you can see these scrolls. And they're just, very vivid. They're like manga or anime, of the time, and just all of these.
I think I've seen images of those scrolls that you're talking about. I think I've seen online somewhere. I've looked at, and on documentary type shows, I've seen them. Anyway, yeah.
And Genshin, I mean, that book is full of stuff that seems really strange to us. I mean, like, he's at one point he says that there's people who make loud noises on drums, in the woods or something, or in the people who bang on drums, like, go to this certain hell. Maybe he just didn't like drums. His neighbors were banging on taiko drums, and he was like, I'm gonna send these people to hell.
Yaksha, isn't there something with the yaksha that they make noise? Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because it does raise a question of, like, how should we interpret this stuff, right? We're never a neutral reader of the text. We have to kind of like decide, like, is this all literal descriptions? But there's actually, he gives all these descriptions of the hells, and then he says something interesting, which is that wherever there is suffering and pain and evil and all of this, sickness, that place is hell. So we as modern people, we can't necessarily buy in to necessarily these like literal places, and a place of fire and under the earth and so on. But at the same time, we live in a world where there are all kinds of hells, right? I mean, there's the hell of wars, there's hells of sickness, there's hells that we create ourselves, addictions. I mean, there's no end to the sufferings and the realms of suffering in this world. So that, according to Genshin, those, that is hell, right? Those are hells that people are in. I mean, there's, like the school in Ukraine, or the building that got bombed and all those people lost their lives. I mean, that's hell on earth. We're in a world where hell is literally everywhere you look. So we don't need to necessarily subscribe to a literal, interpretation of all these descriptions, right? In order to recognize the truth of what Genshin says, that pain, suffering, the retribution that we receive from our own ignorance, anger, hatred, unenlightenment, this is the meaning of hell, right? In a Buddhist sense. So it is it's an important text, even though for some modern readers it seems kind of fanciful. It's still the message of it is, but anyway, I wanted to move on to what he then talks about, Pure Land practice. And but Genshin, he was right before Honen, but he still had a very he talks about a lot of practices like, deathbed rituals, for example, that, might help a person be born in the Pure Land and so on, I believe. But the core of his message is, the Nimbutsu. And also he's very famous for saying the line about, even though I am completely blinded by blind passions, I can't see the light. The light is always shining on me. And this describes, perfectly the state that we are in as unenlightened beings. We are blinded by our own ignorance and passions and so on and so forth. And it's only through the light that's shining on us. It's not like we are illuminating ourselves. we're just stumbling around in the dark. We can't see where to put one foot in front of the other. But the Buddha, from the side of, from the other shore, from a nirvana, the realm of Amida, which is the realm of nirvana, the realm of infinite light, wisdom, compassion, is shining on us. So, and that's the meaning of, other power. It's not coming from within ourselves, it's coming from outside of ourselves. And this is why Shinran is critical of, people who were stuck to the idea of the Pure Land only existing in our mind, and Buddha nature, is within, and so on, because they're missing out on the teaching of other power by thinking that if I can just create the Pure Land in my mind, through my own efforts, that would be great. But I can't do that, Shinran tried and failed for 20 years.
If we could do that, if I could do that, I wouldn't be an ordinary foolish bumbo being anymore.
Yeah. You wouldn't. You'd be a Buddha.
Yeah, I'd be on my way already. I could do the sage. That would mean I could do the sage. Do you see what I mean? It's like, how can I can't, the whole point of me coming to Jodo Shinshu teaching is that I can't do any of those things. I wish I could. I really wish I could see it myself. I really wish I could do those practices, but I can't. They're not effective at all. They don't do, even if I had the discipline to actually do them the way they're meant to be done, and actually had access because of my karmic causes and conditions to get to a point where somebody way. And even then, when you get to schools, a lot of times now places aren't really temples anymore, or they're Dharma centers. So it's all lay people. And you're like, and it winds up being almost cultish or weird stuff going on, or do you know what I mean? Like, well,
yeah, there's definitely a lot of problems
somewhere. It's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not a teacher there. I'm not gonna. Anyway, sorry. So, yeah. So the whole point is, I can't see Pure Land as here and now, and that it's in. Everything's in our mind. Like, it's all in our, and in one aspect of Buddhist teaching, it is literally all in our mind. It is our mind stream that this is all. It's the mind stream where this is all happening. But again, knowing that doesn't it calms me down a little bit about certain things. Like having a Buddhist perspective, having a Dharma eye does change you. It does change my perspective, calms me down a little, but it doesn't remotely change the mess that's up here. It doesn't really. Do you see what I mean? I can say,
Shinran Shonyu has a great passage where he says, he gives this definition of, what a bambu is, and he says that we have, passion, these kleshas that give rise to envy and anger and so on, and all these things up until the end of our lives. That's what we are, right? I mean, that's why Shakyamuni, didn't just keep his mouth shut after he was enlightened and taught for our benefit so that we could be enlightened just like he was, right? I mean, it's the greatest act of compassion in history, is that Shakyamuni didn't just, keep his mouth shut, but he taught, the sutras and gave us the path. And
he taught in every possible type of karmic cause and condition of every possible being that could hear his teaching. Including what it ultimately for us, most of us, the teachings about Amida Buddha. But he taught everything. He taught everything. He taught every cause and every type of being that he could in the Saha world. That anyway, yeah. Sorry. Can I ask you a question while we're on the different teachings of the different Jodo Shinshu Buddhists?
I don't know if I'll have the answer, but
well,
you can. Yeah.
This is the thought that I've had, and I wonder whether there's some confirmation of it within Honen's teaching, or Shinran or Irenyo, saying about with the different teachers, the different actual Jodo Shinshu masters, considered the lineage there. Is it almost? It almost seems like to me it was almost like a skill in each one was teaching the Nembutsu teaching in a way that it could be received by the time and place of their time. Do you see what I'm saying? So that eventually it would be, if someone would develop it to the point where it's Jodo Shinshu, where it's the essential. Do you see what I'm saying? Like each one did a successive, a bit closer to, a bit more the faith teaching, do you know what I mean? Until eventually Shinran, Honen really, and then Shinran, really fine-tuned it, I guess you could say. Do you see what I'm saying? Almost like
yes,
team there through kind of like Shakyamuni did with his, I'll teach you this next, and then this next, and then to set it up so that you'd get the ultimate teachings, some for the extraordinary beings that he ended up teaching in the end, and then and some for us, the majority of us humans who are not extraordinary beings. The vast majority. But anyway, is it similar thing with is there anywhere in the teachings where it talks about that? Or
I mean, I think that is the case, and on a historical level, of course, but also on a in Shoshinge, Shinran talks about the masters who appeared in India, China, and Japan, all taught the primal vow. Their message was essentially the same message. They all taught the Amida's vow in the Nembutsu, but of course they did it in different ways in their time, right? And they all had unique, they were all addressing unique challenges that they were confronting in their time. Like in Shandao's time, there was a lot of criticism of the Pure Land school by the Shodo, the Shodomon, the Path of Sages practitioners, and Chandao's works, in his works, he addresses those criticisms. And, you know, we could get a lot deeper into this. I mean, one of my textbooks from Chuobuku Gakuin, which is in the closet behind me, I'd have to dig for it. But in this chapter on Shantao, it actually breaks down, you know, all of the criticisms that he was addressing, you know, against Pure Land Buddhism, right? And the same goes for Donran Daishi, you know, Tonlon, and who Shinran really, you know, looked up to. And of course, Nagarjuna, the first patriarch of, you know, our tradition, is also a patriarch of 100 others, you know, a lot of other schools too. I think he's called the founder of 20 schools or 10 schools.
Everybody claims Nagarjuna. Everybody.
Yeah. Because he was brilliant, you know, and he was, yeah. But there, when Shinran, you know, there a lot, because a major question or, you know, problem within Shinshu studies is, why did Shinran pick these 7 masters? Because there are other Pure Land masters in who were in China and so on, and some of them said great things. Like if you read Kyogyo Shinshu, you find all these quotations from other teachers, you know, supplementary. But Shinran really picked these 7 individuals, and there's a lot of thought, a lot of Shinshu study and scholarship has been on what were the criteria for Shinran picking those 7 people. Because his list actually differs from what the list Honen gives in Senjaku. Yeah, Honen has a different list of expressing the tradition. Now, some of it is, there are parallels. I mean, it's you know, essentially the same, but Honen actually has a couple of people, I think, either at the same time as Shantao or possibly following. So it is a slightly different, you know, Honen had a slightly different list, and Shinran, you know, just has these 7 individuals, and the hymn, you know, Shoshinge and the hymns, it's all 7: Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Tonlon, Taocho, Shantao, Genshin, and Honen. So 7 Pure Land masters for Shinran. And there are, among the criteria that have been expressed, or as being behind this decision, one of them is, did the writer or did the master not only say good things about Pure Land Buddhism, but personally take refuge in Amida Buddha and the vow? So that was one of the criteria. And in the case of some of these other people who said things about Pure Land Buddhism, like, you know, there was a Chinese master who said, you know, this is the most amazing teaching that Shakyamuni taught, because even the person who can't do meditation can still be born in the Pure Land. So he was very positive in his praise of the Pure Land. But if these masters didn't personally, you know, take refuge in and weren't personally born in the Pure Land, that was a big criteria for Shinran.
Okay.
And another criteria was they had to have contributed something unique to the tradition. So some unique insight, like you talked about, the sort of building on previous, yeah.
Makes sense.
And in the case of the 7 masters, they do, there's a particular phrase or teaching or key doctrine within Shinshu teaching that is attributed to each. So for Nagarjuna, the first master, for example, it's the path of easy practice versus the path of difficult practice, and the analogy of taking the hard overland route or being ferried across by Amida's vow. So that was his contribution. And the following masters all have some contribution. And it's all in my textbook, but I think this is a good topic. So if you're interested, not necessarily today, because I'd have to probably prepare a little bit, but we could go deeper into what each of the 7 masters, like what was their contribution and why were they selected by Shinran? Because I think it would be really good topic.
Scholar kind of looking at this, is that what you're saying? This is the scholarship that has looked at that. It's not anything that we can point to in Shinran's teachings that say, this is why or do you know what I mean, chose these.
Yeah, Shinran does not specifically write like, this is why I chose each of these 7 masters. He doesn't like lay it out, right? Yeah, no. And so it is up to scholars, priests, teachers, followers of the tradition to sort of puzzle out what, was why did. Now, Shinran does, of course, go into great detail about what each of these 7 masters brought to the table in terms of the Pure Land tradition. But it's all, he doesn't say like,
and that's why
this is why I only chose these 7. Yeah, no.
Okay, no, that's cool. Yeah, I would like to discuss that at some point, but
yeah.
So, and I just went, I know I had a specific topic in mind for this session, but it seemed like things naturally came up. So I just said, I'm going to just roll with this and ask these other questions. Came up when we were talking. It just naturally arose. But one thing, so just coming back to the topic, I know it's a pretty expensive topic that I raised, actually, probably. But one thing I noticed, a lot of my, so that the 5 Buddha teachings, the 5 Buddhas, the Adi Buddha, all that, it's very Vajrayana. A lot of that is Vajrayana kind of based, or focused, I guess, because it's in the teachings, but focused on that.
Well, and also in Shingon, which of course is Japanese esoteric Buddhism, but
which is kind of the Japanese version of kind of almost Vajrayana-ish. But the exactly. So and that's where a lot of my understanding, I think, of cosmology Buddhist cosmology has come from, the Vajrayana kind of school, Mahayana, but also more specifically Vajrayana, because they just go into such depth with it. There's just so much that they,
it's mind blowing. Literally.
And something I never realized. I was just watching a cosmology, thing, on the Kala Chakra, and the big depiction that made the fame, the I think the most famous depiction with Mara kind of on the outside of the way, I got with his 5 skulls, which is interesting, skulls, and then I never realized that depiction emphasizes the land to the west, and that monk, everything's pointing over there, like, you see this? That's why you need to go over there. And I never realized
that exit sign, with the guy running out.
Where you're gonna keep going, over there. You just top off over there. That's where you want to go. Yeah. And I never realized how that's a major aspect of their cosmology, is to point people to Amitabha. It's amazing. And that I knew there's a major Amitabha practice within Vajrayana. That's a major part of the tradition.
Yeah.
Both there's 2 different things you can do with them. You can do an ungurued practice of that, where you don't need an empowerment, and you can do, and they have they have the empowerment, under a guru that you. So it's very, it's a major aspect of, and that part I knew, but I never realized in their fiction of the cosmology, saying, yeah, go there, go there. But anyway, bringing that back to the Adi Buddha teaching, for some reason I keep going back to that, and some reason that makes me feel more, I don't know, more faith or more reason to entrust. I mean, I know that's partly probably the calculating mind thing going on and whatever, but for some reason, when I think of it in terms of that teaching about, the Dharmakaya or whatever, the Dharmadhatu, and that, the Adi Buddha and primordial Buddha, and then you have which is actually probably every Buddha is the, like, it's because there's a lot of teaching within the sutras that of Amida, that Shakyamuni was a Buddha long before he was the Nirmanakaya Buddha, the historical Nirmanakaya Buddha that we know of. That there's a lot of things
most famously, Nichiren Shonin, Nichiren Buddhism teaches that Shakyamuni is the eternal Buddha, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Every school.
The Vajrayana teachings point to that as well. Say a similar thing, that it's actually these 5 Buddhas are aspects of aspects of Shakyamuni Buddha, or the original Buddha. They also say it, the Vajrayanas. But yeah, the Lotus school, the Lotus Sutra schools, the eternal Buddha being Shakyamuni, but also but for some reason that I don't know why, there's something within me that's that has a very devotional tendency, like a devotee type of tendency. And so when I hear that, like, okay, the original Buddha, the 5 Buddhas, Amitabha is one of the Buddhas, that's the original Buddha, and that's Shakyamuni Buddha. It all, for some reason, that all ties it all together and ties it to all the sutras. And I'm like, yeah, of course. I know I can't really make sense of it because I'm a complete bamboo, but for some reason it makes sense. When I hear people talk about it, when I hear actual teachers talking about it in their learned way and in their wise way, I'm like, it makes so much sense. Do you see what I mean? And for that is I don't know why that is, but I just thought I should raise it in case it's a hindrance as well, in case it's and also to see whether there's anything that points to that type of thing in Jodo's teaching, in Shinran's teaching, Honen's teaching, or Shinran's or Ren. That was it. So that was probably the question. Was that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is there any teaching that would point to something in the Jodo Shinju teachings about that?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is we have to look at. Well, there's so much to say about this topic. Where do I even begin?
Talk about layers of teaching in the 5 Buddha, the 5 Buddha families, the 5 Buddhas. Like
the 5 Buddha families and the 5 Buddhas is is basically a it is, like you say, a Vajrayana practice, right? And it's a Shingon. In Shingon, they also have this practice. And but what I think is that in those traditions, the 5 Buddhas are essentially equal. They're peers, so to speak. And their different devotees may focus on different Buddhas, right? And say, I want to be born in the pure land of the medicine Buddha, Akshoba Buddha, I think. I'm not remembering the Sanskrit, but
Buddha, the Eastern, Buddha,
the medicine master Buddha, basically, or I want to be born in the Western Pure Land of Amitabha, or possibly Amitayus, depending on the tradition. Actually, interesting thing in Vajrayana, as I understand, Amitabha and Amitayus are actually separate Buddhas.
I probably don't know.
It's in Jodo Shinshu and Pure Land. We use those 2 names as both names of the same Amida Buddha. Right? Yeah, but in Vajrayana, it may be that the way the tradition evolved was because Buddhism as it came to Tibet was from a certain stage in development, right, and so on. So I don't know all the details of the historical, but I think Amitabha and Amiteas are actually separate two Buddhas.
Makes sense in the sense that they make reference to there's two different main Western lands, two different main Eastern lands. There's two different directions. There's not just one major.
Right.
There's two major.
Yeah.
And probably countless, but in those obviously count.
Yeah.
But these two that I've heard made reference to in each of those directions. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never when I heard that I was like, oh, I heard it looked at anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and it's the concept in Buddhism of Honzon, or main object of worship, is very sterile and religious studies kind of phrase. But hon means root, core, main, base, primary, and then zone means reverence or worship. So it's actually the same kanji as in the Japanese word sonkei, which means respect. In Japanese, there's a whole bunch of language called sonkeigo, which means respectful language. So this is when I'm at my work and I'm talking to my boss, I have to use sonkeigo. Well, I don't have to, but I use sonkeigo. So
Confucian, is that the Confucian influence on Japanese? Is that where that came from? That
it's Japan is a very hierarchical society, always has been, and it's partly due to the fact that there's a lot of explanations, but small villages basically trying to survive in a very hostile environment. You had to have kind of this chain of command, and it's a very, and there's also a culture of modern Japanese still do this, and it always amazes me. They bring back, when they go on travel, there's a culture of omiyage, which means you bring back souvenirs to your home group. You bring back, so when people in my work go to traveling, they'll inevitably bring back a box full of cookies or something from that place they went. It's a huge industry in Japan, right, because it's their culture, and then they will distribute them to their department. And it always amazes me because one thing, I think it's cool, and I like the cultural part of it, but the history of that is you had people who were very, they brought things back for the survival of their group, their clan, their tribe, their village. It's this culture of, so that's the root of that practice, even though now it's something that is just culturally a tradition, a custom, right? So the sonkeigo, the respect and the various levels and all of that, I don't even know if it's as much Confucian as it just goes back to this Japanese culture of, the way their society was, constructed in the ancient period. But anyway, I said all of that to say,
that's yet another thing that I'm drawn to about Japanese culture. Is I always feel like I want to know my place. I've always looked at my place.
Well, you would be right at home in Japan, because everyone in Japan knows their place. It's in relation to everyone else. It's like you know exactly where you are.
You're like, and Western culture is so different, and American culture and Western culture in general, it's such a different. With exception, there are European cultures where it is a little bit more, you have that stratification, but and even the UK culture, until recent decades, was still quite had that, but more not in the same way. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, continue.
So yeah, so I went on that long tangent to say that the Honzon in Buddhism is the main object of worship, what we take as our primary object of reverence in that, and it's different for each school, right? So famously, the Nichiren school has the Gohonzon, that's the mandala that Nichiren wrote of the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, right? In Shinshu, the Honzon, our Gohonzon is Amida Buddha.
Yeah.
So if you walk into a Jodo Shinshu temple, no matter which one, take your pick, they're all the same. The thing you'll see in the middle is a standing image of the Amida Buddha. So the gold, very beautiful, statue representation of Amida. And then in Honganji, you have on the right, you have Shinran Shonin's portrait. And on the left, you have Renyo Shonin's portrait. And at the head temple in Kyoto, in addition in kind of the, what would you call it? Like the space to the right and left of that, you have the 10-character Myogo, the 10-character name, and then the 9-character or the 8-character name, I think it is, on the left. And people think like because you see this image, right? It's like a human figure, a human representation of Amida. So is Amida a human being? And this leads us to a question of what is the more accurate, because in Shinshu we actually have, it's not just the standing figure of Amida that is a Honzon. It's also, it can be the 6-character name painted Namo Amida Butsu. That is also used as Honzon. In fact, I would have to dig it out to show you, but I wonder how deeply it's buried in my luggage here. I actually got from the head temple in Kyoto a Honzon that is Namo Amida Butsu. So it's a kind of small, it's like for personal use. And so we use that as a Honzon. We also have, well, according to Renyo, there are basically 3 types. There's the standing image of Amida, the statue, basically. The painted image of Amida, which is you've probably seen that as well. It's a very beautiful painted image of Amida with rays of light.
Yeah.
And there are 48 rays of light. Can you guess why? There are always exactly 48.
I didn't realize it was 48. Yeah, those rays were 48. Yeah, I think I know which depiction you're talking about. And I never realized it was 48. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I counted them, and it's exactly 48 always. And the 48, of course, is for the 48 vows, right? And then there's the Myogo that Shinran Shonin painted very often, which is the name. So and within the name, you have the 6-character name, which is what Renyo used. You also have the 10-character name, Kimyo Jinjipo Muge Ko Nyorai, which is, I take refuge in the Buddha of unhindered light shining throughout the 10 directions. And you also have the 8-character name, which is a shorter, version. But I mean, they're all the same essential thing, right? And so the question is, which is the best representation of Amida? That's the question. So what do you think?
Of those 3?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say. I'd say my instinct would be to say any of those are fine.
Yeah.
Just look at our teachings in our school. and any other depiction, do you know what I mean, of Amitabha, even the red Buddha. My instinct would be that wouldn't, if you're coming from faith, wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter what the is. But I would say probably the best three would be those three. If you had to pick, if you had to go, okay, you have to the red Buddha, or you're going to have one of these. Okay, probably one of those three,
right,
would be better. But,
yes,
yeah.
well, so there are things iconographically about our object, our image of Amida, for example, that would not be present with the red Buddha. So, for example, the red Buddha is a seated Buddha, right? He's always sitting.
Yeah.
And in Jodo Shinshu, the statue of Amida is always like this, always holding his hands.
Very active. Very active.
Yes, very active, standing, leaning forward.
Isn't he stepping toward you, kind of? Isn't that?
Yeah.
He's taking a step. It's very active.
Yeah.
That.
Right.
He's
not, if you look at the statue from the side, he's not like standing back. He's actually leaning forward, which emphasizes the teaching of other power coming in our direction, right? The working is directing to us. So that's important aspect, right? And then Rinyo actually said, of those three in Shinshu, we prefer the painting to the statue and the name to the painting. So Rinyo said the name is the most important.
Okay.
And the reason for that is Namo Amida Butsu, the name, contains within it the total truth of
everything.
Jodo Shinshu. So the Namo Amida Butsu in Shantao's explanation of those characters is the person who is taking refuge, and then Amida Buddha's power as well. So it's the entire teaching of Jodo Shinshu is contained in those characters. When we use a standing image, that's actually a pictorial representation of the truth of Namo Amida Butsu. So
yeah,
Namo Amida Butsu is actually primary, and then the standing image is actually a artistic representation, let's call it.
Okay.
And why are the hands positioned like this? The meaning is that the two hands are Namo and Amida Butsu. So the meaning of Namo Amida Butsu is actually in the standing image.
So.
Yeah, itself. So, but the primary, what both are completely valid representations, right? There is a radical school of Jodo Shinshu, and it's the same Shinrankai. They actually say that you shouldn't use the image and you should only use the name. But in Orthodox Jodo Shinshu, we don't say that because we understand that the image is a representation of the name. So at the basic level of meaning, they're the same. We're not like throwing away the name and replacing it with the image. The image is Namo Amida Butsu. The name is Namo Amida Butsu. It's all Namo Amida Butsu. So, what is this object? What are we worshiping? What are we reverencing? It's the light of wisdom that is unhindered, shining throughout the 10 directions. And this is a universal Buddha, right? This is a universal light. Shenron Shonin says that this light of wisdom is actually identical with the Dharma body as suchness, the Hosho Hoshin, the Dharma body. And so this is, in Shinshu, we're not worshiping one Buddha out of 5. We're not like picking one and saying, we're going to worship Amida instead of the medicine Buddha. We're worshiping Amida as the light that is unhindered, shining throughout the 10 directions. And then Shinran also says that Buddhas, all transformed images of Buddhas, and so on and so forth, all come from this light. This light takes the form of, sages and Buddhas and, Amida and so on and so forth. And so that's a kind of a fundamental difference, I think, between, like, if you have the 5 Buddhas in Shingon or Vajrayana Buddhism, and then the teaching of in Amida. And I actually asked Kobai Sensei at one point, some Westerners kind of have a, problem with, I don't think you have this problem, but some people, might, of seeing the image of Amida as being like, is it like a god? Is Amida, sort of a deity or something like that? And what should we do about that? And Kobai Sensei's reply was, well, just replace the image with the name, the written name, because there's no, you're not missing out on anything. It's the same meat. Yeah. And when it says, when Shinran says that this light that is the object of our, of Shinshu's devotion is inconceivable. We can't conceive of it in terms of, he says, it surpasses color and form and all of this. It can't be conceived of in terms, in Tanisho, there's one of the chapters talks about, there's this argument about how, you might see a different size of Buddha depending on how you meditate. And, some people will be born in the Pure Land, there'll be a bigger Buddha than other people, depending on how much they meditated or how much they practiced the Nimbutsu.
Or they did generosity or,
Yeah. And the author of Tanisho critiques this and says, well, a Buddha by nature transcends size, measurement, color, all of these things. That, the Buddha nature, what the Buddha is beyond all of this stuff. So this can't be a true interpretation, right?
Exactly.
So in that sense, I think the Honzon, the object of worship in Shinshu is considerably different, I think, differs quite a bit from the 5 Buddha teaching, because it's a and there's a lot more that we could talk about on this topic as well, because there's some good texts on it. But essentially in Shinshu, Renyo Shonin says that Amida is the Hon Butsu and the Hon Shi of all Buddhas. And what that means is Hon Butsu means original Buddha. So the original Buddha preceding all other Buddhas. And then Hon Shi means the original teacher of all the Buddhas.
Okay.
And this is
back to that. Yeah. So
yeah. And this is reflected. Oh, go ahead.
Who said that? Who said
Renyo Shonin.
Renyo Shonin. Yeah. So continue. Yeah.
And this, the idea of Amida being the original teacher also makes sense, because it's said in the scriptures that all Buddhas attain enlightenment through Amida, through the wisdom that is the light of Amida. So Amida is the Buddha of Buddhas, the teacher of all Buddhas, the original Buddha. The vow of Amida is the basic, is primary to Buddha. So when we're talking about Amida as one of 5 Buddhas, that's not the object of worship of Shinshu. That is Amida as a provisional, as a transformed Buddha. Yeah. And Amida as a transformed Buddha, there's many transformed Amidas. In this Pure Land Sutras, it says every Amida has like transformed Buddhas that come from the light, and then each of those transformed Buddhas has like a billion transformed Buddhas. It's like, Buddha, a Buddha bonanza, a bonanza of Buddhas, if I can use the phrase. But these are transformed Buddhas. These are not the Hojin. When we're talking about the fulfilled body, which is what Shinran takes as the true Amida Buddha. This is Kimyo Jinjipo Mugeko Nyorai, the Buddha of unhindered light shining throughout the 10 directions. So this Hojin, this fulfilled body of Amida transcends these myriad transformations. In other words, the Buddha of the image of Amida that comes to welcome people. That's a common motif in Pure Land imagery. That's a transformed Buddha. That's not the fulfilled Buddha. Now, of course, the transformed Buddha comes from the Dharma body, right? But we don't take the transformed Buddha as the object.
We go to the original. We go to the
we go to the fulfilled Buddha. And the fulfilled Buddha is based on the 5 vows, specifically of light, infinite life. So that is the vow through which, for Shinran, why we call it the fulfilled Buddha is because this Buddha exists through the fulfillment of those vows.
Wow. Okay. This is so key because I've never got this before. It's been pointed to by other teachers I've had, readings I've done, or listenings I've done, and I've heard that whole thing that Amitabha is the original Buddha and is but I always got tripped up by the time and space aspect of, okay, there were 50 Buddhas and then Amitabha, then there was a Lokeshvara Buddha, I can't remember how many Rarajas can we have?
Hard to pronounce, but
to be irreverent, but Lokeshvara Buddha, and there was Dharmakara Bodhisattva making it, getting teaching from Lokeshvara, and that whole thing of that happening in time and space, which sort of even though I kind of know, well, Buddhas transcend all time and space and universes, whatever universe or wherever that took place with, it's certainly set when Shakyamuni teaches it. He says, well, there were these 50 past Buddhas, naming each one of them, and then there was Lokeshvara, and then there was a king, and do you see what I mean? He sets it time and space, so that always made me go, well, he came later, but then made Buddhism 2.0, or do you know what I mean? And that's why King of Buddhas, because that's the ultimate. Finally, these come the ultimate, and I suppose that had to happen too. But that trips me up. That's why I can't. Yeah, is that the original? Because that's not. So that he happened here, but then there's there is the primordial Buddha that's taught about, or the eternal Buddha, but that's also Shakyamuni, and and so I get it on the level of Dharmakaya. Yes, yes. The answer is yes. It's all of that. All any way you frame it is true. I get that, but that time and space. Why the time? And do you know what I mean? There's the why. Calculating mind. Well, that trips me up. I could never. But now having this discussion, I'm sort of. I feel like I'm getting over that hurdle. If you see what I mean.
Good. Yeah, there are, when we read the larger sutra, what I want to say is there are two levels, two levels of truth within that sutra. The conventional level is just how we read it literally, which is that there was this monk, Dharmakara, or rather there was, a king who gave up his kingdom, just like Shakyamuni did. He went out to search for the truth, the path to liberation. He became a monk. He met Lokeshvara Raja Buddha, and then made his vows to establish a Pure Land. And then he fulfilled those vows, and that was the beginning of Amida Buddha, right? That's the conventional layer. But the deeper layer, I want to say, the deeper truth of the larger sutras is where Shinran says that Amida, it's said that Amida attained Buddhahood so many kalpas ago, but he seems to be a Buddha older than time itself from the very beginning. And Shinran actually uses the term kuon jojitsu. And this is, the characters are sort of hard to, but kuon means eternal, beginningless past.
Kuon, oh yeah.
So let's
Kuon.
just try to wrap our minds around that for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once we're not able to do so, we'll continue on to the next letters. Again, remember what I said about Buddha's time, and the theory of time in Buddhism is not conventional time. It's not a linear one, we're talking about, dimensional time kind of beyond. So let's keep that in mind, but we're still not going to be able to wrap our bamboo heads around it. So kuon is beginningless, eternal past, beyond the past, kind of. And then jojitsu is jo means sort of became or realized, and then jitsu means the truth. So the Buddha that attained, and this is in other scriptures, this is not a term Shinran invented, this is kuon jojitsu nyorai, means a Buddha who attained enlightenment in the beginningless past. So in other words, in English, it's often called eternal Buddha, which is kind of a abbreviation, sort of an unfortunate, it doesn't really communicate what's being communicated, in my opinion. But so on the deeper level, Amida is kuon jojitsu nyorai. So the Tathagata who attained enlightenment in the beginningless past, and he's actually appearing in the story of the larger sutra as Bodhisattva Dharmakara. So he's actually preceding his own appearance in that. And what you have is the realm of the eternal time, in which time doesn't, follow the rules we think it does, is breaking into conventional time in the appearance of Dharmakara. So that is the deeper truth of the larger.
It's almost like it's almost like he knows we have to have something to latch onto. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, and the purpose, if you ask why, we
need to have reason to. Just I saw how and so how many different other worlds has he done the same thing? Do you know what I mean? Throughout beginningless time, that broken into time in different forms, but all for the Amitabha teaching to eventually be given by all Buddhas. And
the purpose of him taking on this form as Dharmakara and working to fulfill these vows was to fulfill those vows, to make those vows effective for the salvation of beings. So in Buddhism, cause and effect in the conventional plane, of course, you get into advanced Buddhist Nagarjuna and so on, and there's this world in which cause and effect kind of breaks down. But in the conventional samsaric time, cause and effect, there has to be cause for effect and so on. So when Dharmakara fulfilled the vows, that is how the vows became powerful and effective for our liberation, right? And so that understanding, that's the basic understanding in Jodo Shinshu. And this is a bit different from the conventional view that, there are many, many Buddhas, and Amida is just simply one of these, happens to be one of these Buddhas among many, is not quite is not quite reaching the level of Jodo Shinshu's understanding. So in terms of the 5 Buddhas, again, like I said, those would be transformed Buddhas, kind of transformed Buddhas, and then Amida would be one of those. So keeping in mind that distinction, there's no problem with, when I go to visit a temple of some other Buddhist tradition, and there may be a statue of Shakyamuni, there may be a statue of Kannon Bodhisattva, of Guanyin Bodhisattva, there may be whatever the image is. I always put my hands together and bow and say, Namo Amida Butsu.
Yeah.
And that's what all Jodo Shinshu Buddhists do whenever they visit. Even if you visit a Shinto shrine, you can say Namo Amida Butsu. It's all, because it's all transform, it's all the working of Amida.
And I had that same, I've done that same thing with no matter what Buddha image I see throughout my day, somebody's garden, as I'm taking my lunchtime constitutional, I'll just stop, Namo Amida Butsu. Yeah. I'll do that same, I'll do this exactly where I see it in a garden center. There's a whole array of Buddhas on show. Yeah. Amida Butsu. I've done that very same thing as well. No matter what the Buddha depiction is, I still Amida Butsu to involve. But anyway.
Yeah, so we can do that. We can take these transformations as windows, as faces, as aspects of the truth. Now, we don't, the important distinction is, so Rinyo Shonin says Amida Ichi Butsu, so one Buddha. We only worship Amida Buddha in Shinshu tradition, right? So, Rinyo says we should just kind of not worry about other Buddhas and other Bodhisattvas. So we don't, I don't, if I go to Todaiji in Nara, there's a huge famous image of Dainichi, of Vairocana Buddha. So I'm not saying, Namo Vairocano, Namo Dainichi Nyorai. I'm saying Namo Amida Butsu. So I'm even though the image is of Vairocana Buddha, I'm only directing my, devotion. Well, I hesitate to say devotion because I don't think of myself as the most devotional person, but I'm only
all those
referencing
what Honzon means. Yeah. Reverence, worship.
Yeah. I'm only bowing. I'm only bowing my head to Amida Buddha, the fulfilled, body of Amida Buddha. So that is, my, and unfortunately today, a lot of this is just off the top of my head. There's so many, we really need to dig into the passages that discuss these issues more, because I think if you just hear me say it, it's like, well, that's one thing. But then if you actually see where Shinran Shonin writes these things, in that book. Were you able to pick up a copy of the collected works of Shinron at all when you were in the US?
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. I've tried to see if I could get it through something like Amazon or eBay, but they always it's so expensive. So I've got to find a place.
Yeah.
I
wonder
within the UK there must be a Jodo Shinshu thing within the UK, but I haven't looked into it enough to see whether there is something. Yeah.
You might try Amazon, and you might also try to get in touch with Gail, the lady who runs the bookstore there in Berkeley. That is the BCA bookstore, because they may be able to ship it to you internationally.
Okay.
And it might be like the fee might be a little higher, but you could maybe, get something worked out. Maybe ask. I think if you go to their website, there's probably a contact form, and it's a real person. Like I've ordered so many books from them over the years, so they will address your question if you ask it. It's not like it goes to some nameless call center.
Before, so okay, I'll do that. I'll see if I can
that book. It would be really helpful, I think, for if you're serious about Jodo Shinshu as opposed to just generic Pure Land Buddhism. Then obviously Shinron's thought, Shinron's writings are central, and key to so many understandings. So really having the printed book, I think, would be a great benefit for your, study and reading and so on. So I would recommend if you have the means, to try to pick up a copy, but don't pay like $200 for it on eBay.
Yeah, things are way overpriced for what get through an actual distributor. But the so it's just to kind of wrap this up a bit. I know because we've gone way over the time. I'm mindful that you and I also
no worries.
I don't want to take time, but the is that this aspect of things I never, probably a combination of it, just I've never had someone kind of talk through this with me before, in the way we are, like in the to understand this aspect of the teaching. It was always kind of like, well, don't. It was just kind of like, don't focus on that. Amida, just focus on Amida. Marina is the original Buddha. That's all you need to know. And it's like, well, I still
doesn't answer the question exactly.
And I'm supposed to express my doubts, right? This is one of my questions, one of my doubts. I need to watch. But you know what I mean. So I often be abbreviated, and it could partly be I wasn't. It's just I wasn't ready to actually hear the answer. To hear to actually be able to discuss it. There's as far as my own causes and conditions and my own point of level of openness and and all that. But I've just never had this conversation for any of those combinations of reasons. I've just never. I'm glad to now finally be doing this, because this is a big one. This is definitely a big, that aspect of, wait, he's the original Buddha, but did it happen in time and space? All that calculating mind stuff definitely trips me up. So this is the first time I feel like a loosening of that. I feel like I can see over the, I can finally see over the hedge now, over the.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So listen properly. Over hedge, over, what is it? What's that word? Even if we listen over hedge or over, what is it?
Hear it through the over a fence, Rinya Shonin says, I think.
Yeah. I'm finally able to at least look over the fence now.
See what's going on.
Yeah. Whereas before I could see it was the hedge there, and I could hear, you're saying this, but I see this. Look at that hanging on the fence there. That's the time and space. That says that, but you're saying this, and I just couldn't. Yeah. But now I'm actually looking over and talking directly to somebody.
Well, that is awesome. There's a great passage in the introduction to Kyogyo Shinshu, the green book that you have. And the introduction is by Inagaki Hisao Sensei. And in there, he mentions that Shinran Shonin's interpretation of transformed Buddha is basically any Buddha that can be measured is a transformed Buddha.
Transformed Buddha, yeah.
Because the true fulfilled body of Amida is, what does it say? Immeasurable light. And it transcends all measurement, all quantification that we can do intellectually with our mind, totally transcends it. So that's a good, passage that provides the Shinshu point of view, which is a bit different from, the let's call it the traditional Jodo, traditional Pure Land school or viewpoint. So, but again, these are all topics that I think it would be great to discuss in more detail. If there's an aspect of it that you want to explore further, we can also ask people who have more knowledge than I do. I do know people as well who we could ask. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad though that just discussing it, you were able to kind of get to that point where you're looking over the hedge.
No, Kobai Sensei. So it's like, people that Kobai Sensei.
Yeah, and I'm meeting him, by the way, on I think it's July 2nd, I want to say, but very shortly, in a couple of weeks, I'm meeting him. So if you have any questions related to, especially, Kobai Sensei's real field of, work is Shinjin and the name, relation between faith and the name and all of that. So if you have questions or doubts related to that, Jodo Shinshu doctrine, then by all means, send them to me, and I will try to ask them or bring them up when I see him again. So,
okay, yeah, we'll do.
I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, and thank you for sending me that short video of him.
Oh yeah. I thought it might be fun for you, or
I don't.
Good for you to see him actually, doing
Rare privilege. I've never seen him. I've only seen one video with him, I think, ever, where someone asks the answers. Definitively, Amida Buddha is a real Buddha, and but I've never seen anything else. So that's like a rare privilege to be able to see that and to see that joy of him.
What amazes me is that he has the passages memorized. Like he just closes his eyes and like recites it from memory. I like, wow. I've got a ways to go before I get to that point.
Exactly. If ever I get to that, anything even close to that. Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you very much. Very
you're welcome.
Accommodating and
always a pleasure. And let's try to set up, another session either before, maybe after, at least July when I meet Kobai Sensei would be great. So. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So so not next week or.
If you have, what if we do it this way? Let's think about what we discussed today, and then through your own reflection and reading, if issue comes up where you feel like this is something we need to talk about, then we can schedule. Or maybe if you're busy that week or that weekend, you have something else, we can always do 2 weeks. I'm pretty flexible. So, I mean, we don't have to meet every week, but if you prefer that, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I do prefer that. And I can do this earlier too, if it's, I can do it earlier, I can do it at the 11 o'clock slot, either way.
11 o'clock, usually I can't, I probably won't be free this early. So 11 would probably be closer to the time when I can do if we're doing next week.
All right, so let's, I don't think there's any, can we just tentatively say we'll meet next?
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good.
Fine. And that's 8 o'clock your time. And then, if something arises, I'll try to let you know earlier then I'm very mindful that I've been doing that because things have come up with things happening at the weekend with
no worries. Yeah, we can reschedule at the worst, and the worst case scenario, we'll just push it forward a week.
No, exactly. But yeah, let's tentatively say, yeah, I'd like to do it next Sunday at 11. And
okay, sounds great.
All right. Well, thanks again, very, very much. I really so appreciate the time that you give for this. It's so helpful, and so and I so appreciate it. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Namo Amida Butsu.
Take care.
Take care. You too. Bye.